Not long ago, reports were coming out that the Nintendo Switch was on track to be the highest-selling video game console of all time, at least ignoring the Nintendo DS. This achievement coming within striking distance of the PlayStation 2's long-standing record. Sony, shortly after these reports came out, reaffirmed that the PS2 in fact had sold over 160 million units, seemingly, I guess, accounting for some units that just hadn't been reported on in the past. With this being the case, it seems that the Nintendo Switch still has a little ways to go before achieving that top spot. Now, this record isn't honestly important to me. I don't care how long the PS2 maintains its long-standing record. It just, with all these reports, it really got me thinking again about the PS2 and all of my memories with it. I remember the excitement about playing cutting-edge 3D games, the ability to have my own personal DVD player. It was a system that made me, a snot-nosed elementary school kid, feel a little bit more grown up for whatever reason, just because I had this cool piece of entertainment tech right in my bedroom. Those who never grew up during the PS2 era might not understand how impactful it was for the gaming industry at the time. These days, it's pretty standard to see the general public just buy up whatever new system is out on the market, and improvements to graphical fidelity is to be expected with each new system. While the PS2 did these things, it did it during a time when widespread adoption just wasn't the norm. Improvements to video game hardware were also allowing particular boundaries to be pushed, not just in graphical fidelity alone, but in showcasing what an interactive medium could really be. I'm only being slightly hyperbolic when I say I don't think we're going to see another console run that was as impactful to the gaming zeitgeist. This is the history of, and a general love letter to the PlayStation 2. PlayStation was birthed from a mix of betrayal and spite. Before the PlayStation, Sony wasn't really known for gaming. They were known for other media-related consumer tech products like TVs, cameras, and music players. This was about to change when they were approached by Nintendo. In 1988, Sony and Nintendo partnered together to develop a CD expansion to the Super Nintendo, similar to what Sega did with the Sega CD. This system add-on would be internally known as PlayStation. As the development of this add-on progressed, Sony would find themselves to be betrayed by Nintendo, ultimately leading to the cancellation of the project. Now, what was this betrayal? Well, you see, Nintendo was wary of losing control over the software licensing while working with Sony, and secretly struck a separate deal with Philips, which at the time was one of Sony's biggest rivals, and they were also a company that helped co-develop what was at the time the sort of technical standard for the CD-ROM. Nintendo publicly announced this new deal with Philips at the 1991 Consumer Electronics Show, and understandably, this left Sony feeling embarrassed and pissed off. But rather than cancel the project, Sony leaned into its anger, turning its CD add-on into its own standalone system. Born out of spite, the Sony PlayStation launched in December 1994 in Japan and September 1995 in North America. And frankly, this sort of changed the gaming landscape. The PlayStation was an underdog in a market completely dominated by Nintendo and Sega. But with its focus on 3D graphics, its cost-effective CD-ROM storage and distribution system, and its targeting of a slightly older demographic, it quickly carved out its foothold. Games like Final Fantasy VII, Metal Gear Solid, and Resident Evil all showcased the system's potential and proved that gaming as a medium could have the ability to actually tell compelling stories. By the time the dust had settled, Sony had sold over 100 million units of the PlayStation, dethroning Nintendo and forcing Sega into a defensive position with its failed Sega Saturn system. The PlayStation brand had been born out of spite, but it thrived on innovation. As the new millennium approached, Sony wasn't just aiming to match its rivals with its follow-up console, it sought to leave them behind entirely, and there would be no doubt that something great was on the horizon. Towards the end of the 90s, the video game industry was in the midst of a new transition. The PlayStation had sort of redefined gaming, breaking sales records and changing the landscape with its large library of content that was catering to all different types of demographics. As the fifth console generation was beginning to wind down, the stage was being set for the next big console clash, and it all began with Sega's big gamble. The Dreamcast launched in North America on September 9, 1999. The Dreamcast embodied Sega's attempt to reclaim the dominance it had lost in the 32-bit era. Armed with innovative features such as built-in online connectivity and a library of graphically impressive games like Sonic Adventures, NFL 2K, and Soul Calibur, the Dreamcast was starting with its best foot forward. At the time, fans and critics alike hailed it as Sega's redemption arc, a sort of phoenix rising from the ashes of the Sega Saturn's commercial failure. And for a moment, things were actually looking really positive for Sega. The Dreamcast had sold over 225,000 units in the US alone on its first day, marking it as the most successful console launch in history at the time. This exciting and successful launch led many to believe that Sega was poised to be the next market leader for this generation of console. It seemed like their big return to form since the Sega Genesis days, but unfortunately, the celebration was short-lived. Sony, the new giant of the industry, had announced the PlayStation 2 in March of that same year. With talks of revolutionary graphic capabilities, backwards compatibility with the original PlayStation, the PS2 wasn't just pushing itself as the next new game console. It was going to be a look into the future of entertainment. As 1999 gave way to the year 2000, the Dreamcast's momentum began to fall. Despite a solid library and a passionate fan base, the Dreamcast just could not keep up with the PS2's marketing momentum, along with the anticipation for its multimedia capabilities. The early success of the Dreamcast began to turn bittersweet, as retailers, analysts, and fans alike began to ask the uncomfortable question: could the Dreamcast survive the highly anticipated arrival of the PlayStation 2?
I'm here for the PlayStation 2, the best entertainment system to hit the world. It's gonna be great.
When the PlayStation 2 launched on March 4th, 2000 in Japan, and later that year in October in North America, it didn't feel like a normal console launch. It was a cultural event. Anticipation had reached a fever pitch, fueled by Sony's promises of unparalleled graphics, backwards compatibility with the original PlayStation library, and one key feature that would separate it from every other console on the market. The PS2 was also a fully functional DVD player. Sony had been meticulously laying out the groundwork for this moment. The original PlayStation didn't just beat the industry titans like Nintendo and Sega, but they also began to shift perspective how the general public viewed gaming. With this new console launch, Sony wasn't positioned as an underdog, but as the dominant force, and they intended to maintain that position. Months before the PS2's release, teaser trailers and magazine spreads painted a picture of an otherworldly device. The console's emotion engine was touted as being powerful enough to create graphics so lifelike they would make games feel like movies. For millions of fans, the PlayStation 2 wasn't just the next step in gaming, it was the future of entertainment. And this hype wasn't just theoretical. When the PS2 launched in Japan, it sold nearly 1 million units in a single weekend. The demand was so intense that reports were beginning to circulate of customers camping and waiting for days outside to snag their pre-orders and then flip said pre-orders onto the black market. By the time the PS2 had arrived in the States in October, Sony was grappling with console shortages, a logistical nightmare that would evidently end up fueling the mystique surrounding the PS2. Similar to how we see other consumer tech releases today, the scarcity of the PS2 at the time began to show itself as a status symbol in the US. A must-have item that transcended past just the typical gaming culture and began creeping into the mainstream consciousness. And then there was the DVD player. In the year 2000, the entertainment industry was undergoing a big shift. DVDs, once a niche format, were becoming the new standard, promising superior picture quality and bonus features that VHS simply couldn't match. However, standalone DVD players were still prohibitively expensive for many consumers. Sony saw an opportunity and seized it. The PS2's price of $299 wasn't just a decent price for a system, but it was an absolute bargain for someone's first DVD player. For many households, the PS2 was the first family DVD player. And I'm sure there are some of you watching this video right now who are able to convince their parents to get a PS2, not because it's the next new game system, but the fact that it was the new affordable DVD player. The PS2 often saw high attachment rates with DVDs. Many films, like The Matrix, which released on DVD just a year prior, became essential viewing experiences on the PS2. The importance of the DVD player can't be understated. This blurred the line between gaming and home entertainment system. It was no longer confining itself to the bedroom of teenagers or being brought out for the occasional gaming session, but it was shifting to become a focal point of a living room entertainment center. For games, the PS2 had a solid offering to get things started. Titles like Tekken Tag Tournament and Ridge Racer 5 gave a glimpse of the system's potential, while SSX quickly became a fan favorite, appealing to both gamers and newcomers. The PS2's backwards compatibility feature was a big selling point. Many people had a large library of PS1 games, and backwards compatibility wasn't really a thing in previous console generations. So the ability to play your old titles whenever you want on the new system made it a much more enticing deal to buy in right away. During its first year, the PS2's big tentpole moment wasn't with any single game, but with its aesthetic itself. Sony's marketing campaign for the PS2 centered around the slogan, "The Third Place." In North America, this emphasized the console as a gateway to another world. Commercials were surreal, almost dreamlike, with David Lynch even directing one of these commercials.
Welcome to the third place.
PlayStation 2! The third place!
Much like we see in today's marketing, the PS2 wasn't about selling the hardware inherently. It was about selling the idea, the experience. It wasn't pitched as just a console, it was a transport into something special. That said, it wasn't all perfect. At the time, some critics criticized its launch lineup as uneven, and it did take a little while for developers to unlock the full potential of the hardware with the PS2. But at the end of the day, none of that really mattered. The PS2 transcended all of its competitors. The console wars were far from over, but Sony had made its intentions clear. The PS2 wasn't just a successor, it was the new standard. The PlayStation 2 was special, but it wasn't special just because it was the successor to an already popular console. The system was special because it came out during a time when technological advancements, creativity, and gaming culture as a whole all harmoniously resonated with each other in a way that we hadn't really seen at that time. It was a time when the industry sought revenue by making the next best thing instead of trying to monetize every corner of the game, chase hollow player engagement trends, and the like. It was a time when gaming was gaining popularity to the point where developers were receiving more funding, and the industry was still young enough at the time to where the focus was simply more on making a better product and was less bastardized by executive corporate overreach. This sort of Goldilocks zone is what I think makes that console generation so special, and especially so for the PS2. It was a system that boasted both scale and diversity, showcasing everything from groundbreaking AAA blockbusters to quirky experimental AA titles. It was home to Grand Theft Auto 3, Vice City, and San Andreas, which literally pushed boundaries and redefined what open-world gaming could be. It would embrace the eccentric charm of games like Katamari Damacy, while other titles like Shadow of the Colossus elevated video games to a more artistic focus. This level of quality and variety wasn't happenstance. It was the result of an industry that had not yet been consumed by factors such as risk aversion or pressure to have the games constantly monetized. Budgetary constraints and publisher meddling has and will always be a thing. But during this time, developers were given a little bit more flexibility with experimentation. A single $50 purchase would give you a complete package. No season passes, no paywalls, and no constant updates required. By garnering both quality blockbuster and niche titles alike, the PlayStation 2 was able to have a game suited for pretty much anyone's taste. Really, anyone could have some fun experience with this medium. I think another impressive thing about the PlayStation 2, and something that just kind of highlights how big of a system it was its longevity as a system, as a platform. The PlayStation 2 lasted for 13 years, from when it first came out to its last published game for that system. 13 years for a console lifespan is insanely impressive, and no other system has really topped it yet. Even when it was already outdated, it was still a popular enough of a system where companies would still publish for that platform. And yeah, especially during this point in time, it's just another reason that kind of shows why the PlayStation 2 was such a big deal. The PlayStation 2 wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. It came at the right place, at the right time, and proved that gaming could be as diverse, ambitious, and impactful as any other form of entertainment. Today, its influence can be felt in nearly every corner of the gaming world. The original PlayStation took a medium that was, for a long time, primarily viewed as something for children, and challenged its preconceptions. The PS2 took the medium and fully legitimized it, both as a hobby and an art form for all ages to enjoy. In a world where it seems that traditional console hardware is slowly stepping away from the gaming spotlight, it's fun to reminisce on what the PS2 accomplished during its illustrious lifespan. There will of course be many more innovations and tentpole moments in gaming to come, but there will never be another system or moment like the PlayStation 2.